Hey, we have another awesome one today. On the podcast, we have Connie. How you doing, Connie?
Not too bad, John. How are you?
Fantastic. And just to get a little background on yourself and a quick intro. Can you just give an intro on yourself and what you do in the Salesforce ecosystem?
Sure. So my name is Connie Hazendonk. That's a funny name. And I've been in the ecosystem for about 12 to 14 years now. I have a previous background in market research. So I did a lot of client engagement, client presentations, and I actually became really an accidental admin. So my very first job, they brought me into a sales team and they said, "Oh, you have some that fantastic analytical background. We really wanted what this company is going to implement a new software system, something for sales. Do you want to try? Do you fancy an opportunity to do that?" And so I was like, "Yeah, new tech is always fun." So I said, "Yeah, sure." And so on my very first day, I've never heard about Salesforce up to that point, let alone CRM systems. On my very first day, I had to come in early because the American developer had come over and had an 8-hour meeting where he just ran me through what Salesforce is and does by showing the system. I start talking about things like page layouts and setup, and I'm just sitting there thinking like, this is not an Excel spreadsheet. So literally thrown in the deep end, but really enjoyed it. Did all kinds of different things throughout that time because it was a relatively small company. So just me, admin, and doing everything you can think about. Company downsized, so my role became redundant. And so I had a bit of a think like, what do I want to do? And I liked Salesforce, but I couldn't see myself doing the admin job on a day-to-day basis. And throughout my career, I'd always done training, helping users explaining stuff. And so I was like, well, let's give it a go. So I decided to become a full-time trainer. And so for the last decade plus, I've been focusing on training on two areas. One is end user training, whereby I will go to clients, that towards the end of the adoption process or end of implementation, and I come in and train the user on how to use the system. And then the other side is, I also since 6 years or so certified administrator training. So for the Trailhead Academy, I do administrator training. And I've helped set up a couple of academies that now still exist around UK. And so really enjoy doing both sides, sort of the technical admin side and helping new people getting into the ecosystem and helping businesses really seeing the good things about Salesforce and how to use it. And that's what I'm still doing on a day-to-day basis.
That's awesome. And I know we chat a lot, almost pretty much on a weekly basis. And I know training is one of those topics, especially in the Salesforce ecosystem, that is one of those things that I think a lot of companies are forgetting about. They're not thinking about. And I think that's why I was excited to have this conversation with you today, because I think it's a topic that needs more attention. And I'm hoping we're going to get through that today, but it's a not discussed about enough topic. And I'm hoping you can definitely enlighten some folks on the value of training and all that good stuff. So it sounds like, when you started out in Salesforce, I know you mentioned the one story. I guess what were some of those obstacles when you were learning Salesforce, especially those first few years? What were some of the challenges and obstacles you felt you saw in the Salesforce ecosystem?
Well, sort of 12, 14 years ago, we didn't have Trailhead. We didn't really have the mentorship programs. And so I sort of had to heavily rely on an American developer who actually also, looking back, didn't really understand fully the system. And so I just did a lot of things trial by error. And I have done some, to be honest, looking back, horrible mistakes, which I've done a couple of sessions about in different community conferences. So if people go to YouTube and look for me, they will find some of the stories I've done. I think the biggest obstacle was actually knowing what you should and shouldn't do. And then, especially at the beginning, I think now it's much more different. But back in the days, it's actually knowing what does it mean if I use a profile? What does it actually do? How do I get my user to use the system properly? Should I have the lead function for everybody? All that kind of stuff that sort of, you need somebody to explain that to you or something like a Trailhead now. I just have to find it the hard way. And I think that is, that really sort of, I think in the beginning hinders my development a little bit because I was alone in a small company and I didn't have a big network around of people who knew what to do. which I think now is much more different. You have Trailhead, you have mentorship programs, you have community events. So you don't have to be alone, if that makes sense. Whereby I sort of have to find out, and especially also when I started the training program and to become a trainer, it took me quite a while to find some companies who specialized in training, who could help me, guide me, and help me grow in my career, which was really vital. But it was a lot of, internet searches and trial and error and other people sort of finding you to be able to make something out of it.
Right. So, and what made you passionate? I guess passionate might be a good word. What made you more passionate about following a training path versus like an admin developer path?
I think because it was sort of my second career, so I already had a market research career. I was at the stage where I was looking also for more flexibility, more freedom in my work. So I wanted to do contracting, so I could decide when I want to work, where I wanted to work, and I couldn't see that as an admin, because an admin job would be full-time in the office, pay was sort of okay-ish, but there was sort of limitation there. And like I said, when I did it as an admin, I sort of enjoyed it, but I wasn't really passionate about doing it on a daily basis. And the thing with training, and especially as a contractor, I traveled the world for it. I went to all kinds of fantastic people, went to all kinds of fantastic companies, in all kinds of different sectors. And it's just everywhere in itself is the same. You go in and you help people understanding Salesforce. And you see then in the sessions, those light bulbs going on like, oh, that's why we do it. And oh, this is so fantastic. Explaining somebody that, you can use the mobile app and use the speech dictate function on it. And the salespeople looking like, I don't have to type anymore. It's like, no, you just,
Right.
as you're traveling, you speak to your phone and you notice that.
Right.
And you see that passion coming through, which I didn't see as an admin, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so that's why I enjoy training, to literally bring people this world of tech. Often people are reluctant to go into it, especially from a user perspective. And then actually showing them how fantastic it is and what they can do with it. That's what makes me also going, because it's just fun. And I try to make them fun. I try to make sessions entertaining, joke around a little bit where it's appropriate. So they have a good experience. So when they come out, they really sound like, yeah, I really want to use Salesforce because it's really going to benefit my job.
It's awesome because developers and production support teams and all the people delivering projects, they don't really see the end users and the smiles on their faces and get excited about using the tool in Salesforce. It's kind of like the car salesman gets to give the keys to the people buying the car and they see the smile on the face, but the people that built the car don't get to see it, right? So how is that? So then taking that, like the last 10 to 14 years that you've been doing this, how has it changed from your perspective from when people were bringing in trainers, they were getting excited, there was new technology, there was mobile, and then how have you seen it evolve up until now over the last 10 to 14 years?
I think there is less attention to training. It's been far more difficult to get business to actually say you need training, especially because, also like 10, 50 years ago, we did it all really sit day-to-day on our mobile phone. So, we use Salesforce Classic. It was a different time. People still doing things, with pen and paper. And I think moving over now, I think businesses and people just think like, oh, Salesforce is easy. You get it done. And yes, Salesforce is easy, but you still need to explain to people how to use this, how it links to their day-to-day work. So I think a big shift, unfortunately, on the side is that businesses just have taken it less seriously. And I think part of that is Salesforce is not talking about as much as it did 5, 6, 7 years ago. So that there's less attention in the ecosystem as a whole on that training is needed. And I think now also other technology coming in, it's sort of like, yeah, we'll just roll it out and we might do some e-learning and we'll be fine with it. And I think a lot of people are underestimating the need for users to actually guide them through it and explain to them why and how they need to do stuff. So that's been a massive change to 10 years ago where we asked for more projects. It was far busier. We had far more people being trainers in the ecosystem. We had some very big companies specializing in training. And a lot of that is slowly filtering down at the moment.
That's a good segue because my next question was like the misconceptions from the business and the Salesforce customers and that side of things. What are the biggest misconceptions that you feel companies have as it relates to training, as in they don't, if they need it, if they don't need it, how to do it? Do they even know it exists? Like, what are some of those misconceptions you feel Salesforce customers have as it relates to training?
Think they just can launch Salesforce, say, especially if it's implementation, new companies and sort of established companies sort of in the same realm. They just think they can launch it and that's it, and people just get it. And if there's anything, maybe half an hour by an admin or a developer to train it out to the users. And if you want to use Salesforce properly, you have to link business processes with the system and then how people use it on a day-to-day basis. And how a developer or an admin develops the system is not the same how a user uses the system. And so you need to be able to say to users, right, if you come in at 5 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, this is what you do. You go into Salesforce, you go to this view, you do X, Y, and Z. Somebody needs to give them how they use the system from a user perspective, which is not how we do it as admin and developers and even testing stuff. It's not the same as a user using it. And so that is where you need somebody to come in. Now, it can be an admin with training experience, HR departments potentially could it, but they have to be a bit of a tech knowledge. But you need somebody to sit down with these people and actually explain to them the how and the why of the system.
So, in terms of like your ideal client and the people you help, if I was to take a guess, I would assume that it's mainly initial launches or the first few releases of the system and the platform versus the incremental updates, maybe, 3, 4 years down the road. I guess what is your ideal client and your ideal customers that you support that really can leverage and your training services and training for the users?
I think it's a combination. It's indeed those who are, so to speak, at the moment thinking about getting Salesforce, so they're very early stages or sort of in the middle of their implementation phase. You shouldn't be at the end yet because you should have a trainer. If you don't have one, you need to talk to your project lead and say what we're doing here. So it's people who are about to launch, so to speak. It's actually also business been using it a couple of years. I've been to quite a couple of clients where they see a low uptake of the system because people hadn't been trained properly. So I actually coming in sort of indeed 2, 3, 4 years down the line and help in readapt the system and actually checking, okay, let's retrain people, let's reassess the training materials, and maybe just make a slightly different program where you maybe focus more on e-learning, some short sessions, but actually relaunch Salesforce into a business to create that passion back that people use it properly. So it's sort of two ways. It's sort of like the very beginning, but also some that have been already using it a couple of years and just struggle with people using the system properly. Because
Makes
a lot of
sense.
times it is a user problem, not a tech problem.
Right. So then what you kind of touched on it. What do you provide? Is it e-learning? Is it a program? Is it in person? I guess what are some of the services and training offerings that you have? Like how does it
Um,
work?
yes, I always do bespoke. So a company will contact me, we want training. I make it bespoke to their business. So yes, there's similarities like navigation, stuff like that. There's a lot of things from experience I know how to build, but the majority is bespoke for that company. So it will also be their training. And it depends what they're looking for. So I can do in person or via Zoom these days. I can do video platforms. It depends on the company. I think the best thing is, especially if you're just launching, so if you're really in implementation, I think you need to do a combination of in-person and e-learning. So the initial launch, then after launch, you have this whole framework there for people to go back into. If you're more established company and look at adoption, you probably focus a bit more on e-learning with a little bit of in-person training. But I do both. It depends on how much the company wants, how many people there are, what they're doing. It is a bespoke service. And I think that's the big difference. It's not, I have picked something off the shelf that I've done a gazillion of times and it's just literally copy paste. It will be bespoke for your company with your processes, your terminology. So users connect with it immediately in the training.
Makes sense. And then so given that, since it's bespoke, how do you qualify is maybe not the right word. How do you know if a client would be a good fit for what you do?
There has to be an understanding why training is important. They have to have some idea also like, why we need them and also take it seriously. So being able to listen to me, take up my advice, It doesn't mean we can't adjust it. It's a two-way partnership. That's how I see it. But you work together to actually get these people to use it. But you bring me in as the expert on training because you are not using the system properly, or you want to make sure it launches properly. So I come with a range of ideas and we work together. So it needs to be a client who is, it can't be that you call me now and say in a month's time, we're going to launch Salesforce. We have a couple of 100 users. We need training. You should have thought about it. Yeah. But if you say, right, can you come in for a project for several months? We can figure something out. We need training. You need to be flexible as a company, but understanding the real need for it. And it needs to also come from top down. It needs to be embedded everywhere that also the training becomes compulsory for people to do.
So it's the upfront planning, because I think a lot of projects, I see it all the time as well. They get to halfway down the project and go, oh, we forgot about training, right? And then by the time you get down the road, it's like it's already too late. So where is the best point, and maybe the roles, and who typically should be responsible for making sure training is included up front when the project kicks off?
Well, for me, it should be from day one. So the moment you think you go to an agency for an implementation project, as most businesses use different agency or consultancies, at that same time, you already need to think about training. So it needs to be embedded in from day one. Because as training, I can also come in throughout the time. I've done UAT training and support. So it's not just only end user, but you need to involve from day one. Who is responsible? For me, it's a combination of the project lead, the product owner. Up to a point, also, I think the responsibility lies a little bit with people like technical architects or functional architects. They are the people who come in often in projects and say, this is what we're going to develop. They should say there is training that is needed for this. So I think it's sort of that there's different groups. I think the key area is product owners. They should really think about that. We're now going to take Salesforce. How do we launch it in our organization? It is in the end their responsibility.
Makes sense.
So they're my key, but you sort of have other functionalities around it that can help in understanding we need this. Doesn't mean you need a trainer from day one full time. Yeah. I often do projects for 4 hours a week or maybe a couple of hours for a couple of weeks and then nothing. And I come back again 3 months later. And I think that's often forgotten. They think they need somebody full time for the whole duration. We can dip in and out, which makes it powerful because you save money. I can do other stuff. I come back again, but you get the same person's coming back, but you don't need me full time because you don't need to often train full time.
Makes sense. And so when companies forego user training for Salesforce, what are some of the impacts that they get? Is it bad data? Is it bad reports? Is it user satisfaction is low? What are some of the impacts that you see when they don't get training?
It's a couple of different areas. So yes, you get bad data because you don't tell people why and how they need to do stuff. You get incomplete data a lot of the times, people not updating information or maybe not doing activities, especially like activities, logging all their calls and their meetings, completely drops out, and all data. So the big issue is data. I think also if you don't train the people properly and bring them the passion, you just see after 1 or 2 years, your adoption dropping off. So, I have been back to clients, they've done the initial phase, they had some training, and 2 years down the line, less than half the people are using the system.
Interesting.
Part of that is...
That's huge.
That is big. And I think my advice for a lot of companies actually is if you have bad data or low usage, don't immediately think about the tech solution, because that's what most people complain, but it doesn't do what I want to do, or it doesn't do this bit, it doesn't do that bit. But maybe actually don't need the tech solution. You actually need to sit down with your users and say, right, this is how you should use the system. This is how it helps you. Maybe after training, you can say, maybe you fix some tech issues. But most people are immediately trying to fix it from a technical perspective by changing page layout, adding a new functionality. But it still doesn't help a user who's unhappy and thinks, man, I have to go into Salesforce again today. I have to update my opportunities. Oh, it's the end of the month. I need to update everything because otherwise I don't get my bonus. You need to fix that mentality which you don't fix by technical solutions. You need to bring that with passion, with training, with adoption programs to get people into the system.
Yeah, makes sense. And so, on those lines, I guess, do you have like a success story, a client you worked with where you went in there and trained and got some fantastic results?
The challenge for me is that often I come in, I do my training, and then I disappear. And you might sometimes hear back of it, but a lot of times, I go away. There's some projects where I've come back again, and yes, then you get the uptake to say, yeah, your previous launch, we do the several phases. The first phase went really fantastic. People are using it. We see high adoption. We don't see many issues. And then you come back again for the second phase, and you repeat what you did. But a lot of the time, and that's, I think, my biggest challenge in the training sector, is actually being able to quantify that, but also getting the right feedback to say how much a difference it is. Because it's often they think, yeah, the system was correctly built. Not necessarily we had fantastic training. I see the opposite. If a business has done bad training, that's when I come in to fix the problem. I can see when there's been an issue that they haven't done it properly. And then you come in, do stuff, and then you see the uptake coming in and the enthusiasm coming back. Yeah, does that make sense?
It does. Yep, that makes sense. So for people to kind of switch up a little bit, and the ecosystem's big, right? And from the Salesforce talent perspective, there's admins, developers, analysts. I think training is unique. I think it's under leveraged and underutilized in the industry, which I'm hoping we can shed some light on with this. So what kind of recommendations would you give to Salesforce professionals starting on the industry, especially if they're interested in something like training? I guess from your perspective, what's some of your advice to give people entering the Salesforce ecosystem?
Especially if you want to go into the world of training, I would definitely sort of go first sort of an admin path, so you understand how the system works, so that if you have issues in training, you can solve them, that you understand why your users see something different than you are seeing. So things are, for example, profiles, permission sets. So you need to have a good, I would say, sort of solid foundation, either as admin or developer. Either want to understand how the system works, and then make sure you know a little about a lot. So, for example, I always be honest with people because I also do admin training. My biggest weakness is probably flows. I know they exist, I know what they do, but I can't build it. Because I don't do it. But I do understand how they work and how to interact with them. But I know everything else in the system, and I know Service Cloud and Field Service Lightning and Marketing Cloud. I now have done Education Cloud, I've done Health Cloud. I don't have in-depth knowledge that I can come in and fix problems from an admin developer side, but I can train users on how to use the system. And I think one of the top skills I think you actually need to have as a trainer is being able to stand in front of a group of people, and they are all negative, they don't want to use Salesforce, and bring that passion to the system to them. And then on the other side, being able to work with the technical teams and making them understand sometimes, like, the training's not going well, these are the issues we're having, can we fix that? Because you're often sort of an in-between between users and the technical teams. But I think you have to have a passion. You have to enjoy standing in front of a group of disgruntled people and telling them this is why you do this. If you think you can't do that, it's still something potentially you can, because you go sort of in the development side of training. But you have to have that passion, that understanding why users are using it, why the problems are there. And yeah, you have to have a bit of fun in it.
It's awesome because know a little bit about everything. That makes total sense. A lot of people that are admins and developers and people like that don't like public speaking, because it sounds like it's kind of like public speaking to some extent, right?
Yes.
You got to be able to handle questions on the spot, train, present, communicate, speak well. So is one of the first steps that you do when you start an engagement, who do you work with to understand what they're trying to do? Is it a BA? Is it the business? Is there like a 4-week, trying to understand what they're trying to do with the system? Is that kind of how it goes?
4 weeks is a luxury. No, that's a luxury position, which is
I was
very
thinking
rare.
that was short when I said it.
No, normally if I'm brought in, I normally do a crash course with an admin or developer. Show me what the system looks like. What have you built? That normally is like 1 or 2 days max to get to understanding what it is. and then sit with the business and understand, might be the BA, with the BA to understand the processes. What are the processes we're having? What do we wear in the system relate to the process? And then sit with people like the product owner and actually get an understanding, okay, what is the messaging? What is key that we do? Is it change management involved? Is there certain things we want them to do, don't want them to do? And that sort of all ran normally in a week, and then I start developing. So normally, it's rare that I can get 4 weeks to really get into the ins and outs, because most clients are brought in very late.
Right.
But yeah, but for me, it's sort of a synergy between all the departments. You all work together throughout. So you do a crash course for a week. And then after that, there's a lot of engagement with all the parties that I say, for example, to a development team, like, I expect when I do an opportunity for this to happen, why is it not happening? And then they will say, oh, we customized it. And then I go to for example, product owner and say, well, we normally do here in the process that we, for example, log a call. Do you guys do that? Are you going to use that functionality? Are you going to use Chatter? If so, how do you want to use it? So because you have a little bit of knowledge of everything and how the whole system works, you talk with all these parties to build it out. And that normally then takes a couple of weeks, but the crash course is normally like a week to get to know what needs to happen.
Crazy.
Training is fast. Yes.
Yeah. So, well, as you're navigating this, especially with your business and what you're trying to do, how do you stay motivated in what you do, especially with training, and how do you keep inspired and motivated in your work day to day and week to week?
I think it's the fun working with the people. It's, I try to have fun whilst I'm doing stuff, and being able to work with users and actually see them switching from sort of a negative attitude to a positive attitude. And also because I have like that much knowledge up to a point, it's actually working with people like product owners and being able also to steer them a little bit to give them additional advice. Like early in the year, I went in for a day of reporting training for a company, but those people actually didn't actually understand how, for example, lead conversion worked, or how the standard objects were connected with each other. So throughout that training, I did a little crash course during lunch on those things. And then you see them like, well, then we have to think with our project team to think about how do we fix the system to get this to work. And that's what inspires me, because you're just not doing one thing, you can do more. And then you see them think like, yeah, we really want to use it. You see that enthusiasm going to the customer and the users, and think like, and that's what keeps me going. As long as they have fun, I have fun. The moment I have groups that's not fun anymore, then you need to find a different career.
That's the way it used to be back in the 2000s, early 2000s. Software was so new. Users were so happy. It was so cool. It was fun. It was laid back. You'd do a release. You'd go to happy hour, right? There'd be 40 people there, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
It's like, we got to bring that back. I agree. So how do you stay up to date? Especially as a trainer, you have to know a little bit about everything. How do you stay up to date with everything that you need to understand?
So it's a combination. It's going to events where I can. So local community meetups, doing the big Salesforce events. So go there, see what's happening. Follow news. My main source is LinkedIn, where you just see updates appearing. And regularly being on Trailhead and doing every now and then batches to do the latest stuff. Especially also see like, will it impact me? Do I need to change some stuff? To be able to understand, okay, how do we need, for example, change things from a training perspective or from an admin perspective when I do the admin training.
Makes sense. So then as you look forward, I mean, now that we're looking forward, what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that you see in the Salesforce system in the next 3, 5, 7 years that are coming up?
Well, everybody's talking AI. We haven't talked about it yet. I think we cannot avoid it. I see that as an opportunity to make life of users easier, because you bring functionality in that gives them less work in the system, hopefully, and make it for them quicker to use the system. It can help also without Salesforce, AI as a trainer. You can start using functionality there to build better training programs, better messaging. I think the biggest challenge will be to keep telling to people that training is needed, and to make sure that also when we do stuff, we actually think about, like, is it actually to the benefit of the user? Especially, for example, with AI, we can build the fantastic prompts. We can plug out the assistant and make it a big beast, so to speak, where it can do everything. But does it help the user? So the challenge is we're now getting so overwhelmed with so much new tech I think we all need to take a pause and a breath and say, actually, how is this going to benefit the user? And if it makes their life easy and benefits them, I'm all for it. But if it doesn't give them anything, maybe reconsider. And I think with it, so one challenge is sort of that. The other challenge, I think, is just the data quality. People making shortcuts, things need to be faster, need to be quicker. So your data can go down, which is not a good situation to be in. I think those are, for me, I think the two biggest challenges when I talk from a training perspective.
Yeah, and I think because it almost is like there's all these tools coming into Salesforce, it almost does feel like it's going to be a transition into needing to get users trained, especially on AI, Agentforce, something with prompts, understanding how, let's say, Agentforce is actually helping them, what's it doing behind the scenes. I think there's going to be a lot more training needed to explain to users what's really happening underneath the hood. Like, is Agentforce closing your deals? Is it responding to customer support cases? Why is it doing it? How is it thinking? It almost seems like we're in a transition where moving forward, even though Salesforce is bringing all these tools in to help the users' productivity and the overall productivity of the system, there almost seems like there's going to be a revolution again where the users and the business need to get trained again because it is getting more easy to
Yes.
use yet complicated to understand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the thing about ChatGPT, I think most people, and even most people who are listening to this, probably have played with ChatGPT. And probably your first experience, you type something in a prompt, and you probably get things like, wow, what's the everybody talk about? Everybody's glorifying ChatGPT. I think it's crap. It's not doing what I wanted to do. And then probably if you keep using it and keep adjusting your prompts and keep updating it, you're actually going to another situation. Think like, this is fantastic. It gives me the stuff. And I think that is where we also need to think from a perspective of all the admin and developers who are upskilling themselves, who are getting all this knowledge in place, who are building all these fantastic options. How are you going to bring this to the user as a business also? What do you tell your users? What are the prompts? And indeed, how does it work? And I think, so actually at the moment, training should be actually on the forefront of everybody's mind who is actually going into AI and having these admin and developers developing stuff. Who and how is that message going to be brought to your users? Because probably the other users are thinking, oh, there goes my job. Which
Right.
I don't think necessarily, it's up to the point will be true, but not at the beginning, not until we work it out fully and understand how it works and it works well, then the jobs will go. But until we have a good AI running, it's only, I think, more work to begin with.
Right. And then so do you also partner with like Salesforce SIs and partners that do implementations, and can partners pull you in to partner on projects as well?
Yeah, I'm open for everybody. So the majority I work with is companies as well, going to recruitment agencies, and they come to me. Because like I said earlier on, Salesforce doesn't talk about training. And so if you look at the ecosystem, especially compared to 5 or 6 years ago, nobody talks about training. Look at World Tour or Dreamforce just recently. Did they talk about the success stories that they had about AI? Did they talk about how did they launch it to the users? How did they train the users to use it? And that story is missing everywhere. And so in a point, yes, I need them to give me the work, but it's not on anybody's top of mind to think training. They just think, we built this, the user going to use it, everybody's happy. And I think that's somehow we need to, hopefully this helps, but that's why I need to come in and to say, well, no, just think about your own experience using ChatGPT and how messy it is, or the first time you're going to do a prompt in Prompt Builder and it probably doesn't work. How do you get it to work? Well, the user also needs to know, like you say.
Right. For sure. And then I guess the final question to kind of to pull in the training side of things, and for people maybe considering getting into training, I know we kind of touched on it, but assuming training will take off again in the ecosystem, we hope it
Yes.
does, right? What advice would you give to people that are, I know we kind of talked about it, but just some final advice on people if they want to get into training or go down that path? Do you have any additional advice to give those folks that, after hearing this, are interested in this kind of career path or interested in bringing this to their company? What advice would you give them?
Build up a broad knowledge base. That's one criteria. So really understand how the system works. Look at critical at the system from a user perspective, especially if you're already an admin, or if you're already a front-end user, that's slightly different. But if you're from an admin or developer side, really look critical at the front end and actually start thinking about the user. I think learn the skills how to make powerful training sessions. It's not just demoing a system. How do you get people to do demos? How do they do exercise? So start thinking about that. And I think probably one of the pro tips is, if you're not confident in public speaking, start going to your local meetup sessions. There's so many different sessions locally. There are different events across the world on a monthly basis. See if you can get a slot that you talk about whatever it is. There's a lot of these platforms are open, and get confidence in talking, about the system. Be confident in standing in front of a classroom, so to speak, or a group of people, and bring a message, and being able to work with feedback. And I think that would be probably my advice. Whilst you have some technical knowledge, just really get that confidence in, if I have a group of 20 critical people in front of me, how do you deal with that?
Right. And I think kind of the final point on that is, and I know we chatted about it once briefly, AI. Do you feel AI can take over the training aspect of things? Back to, it needs to be personal. You need to stand in front of people. Where do you see AI fitting in at all to training in the next 5 to 7 years?
I think it can help in building an e-learning platform. It can help in creating the training materials, exercises, short guides, stuff like that. I don't think it can replace bringing that passion to the users. So if you as a business purely go for e-learning, your users, just be honest by yourself. If you get as a general users, I think you're new to a company, you always have these HR introductions where you have to watch videos about, security or whatever, and you need to watch a 15, 20-minute video, whatever. How much do you pay extra attention? So
Right.
So everybody does it. It does training to be done online. How serious do you yourself do online training? I think you find, even if you're honest with yourself, you're something like, I maybe pay half attention and then I speed it up to where I need to be, taking notes, and that's it. So I think it can help, it can support, it can bring variety, it will help speed up the process for a trainer. So we don't need as much time in developing the materials, but I think you still need somebody to bring that passion to your users. You can't replace that until our robots are going to be really clever in the next couple of years. That's what you still need, somebody to make sure people do the exercise and really understand what they're doing. So again, it's a support tool. That's how I see it.
Makes sense. And then, so if people are interested in reaching out to learn more, where do they go?
So I'm branded as Train Salesforce. That's one name. So on all social media, trainsalesforce.com is my website, or just find me on LinkedIn, connect there, chat with me there. Always happy to talk with people, explore opportunities. I think the biggest message for me, for people who think about bringing in a trainer, most of us, and I talk with a lot of other people who are also trainers, a lot of us are very flexible. You don't necessarily need those 40 hours a week for the next 3 months. We can do it flexible. We can work, often a lot of us work like I work on hourly basis. So if you want something, I can say, well, the build takes me X amount of time. I can do it at home whenever I want to. You get your materials, and I then come in for the delivery. So there is a lot of flexibility. You don't necessarily need somebody to come in as a full-time employee, permanent employee, or even on a long time on a project. I mean, we can be very flexible and dipping in and out.
Awesome.
But I think you need it. Anybody who is on implementation at the moment and doesn't have a training plan needs to have a chat with either me or any other trainer and actually think, like, how are we going to bring this to our users?
I agree. Let's bring training back. Let's bring it back.
It needs to come back. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Connie. It was great chatting with you today. And really appreciate your time.
Thank you, John. A great session.